Our gospel's a particularly strange sort of gospel. It begins by some Greeks wanting to interact with Jesus. And then you get this shifts very quickly, this gospel, to something that's almost completely unrelated to this moment of Jesus in deep prayer and then a voice coming from heaven. It's almost a bit like a transfiguration. And people will say, oh, no, that wasn't a voice from heaven, that was a clap of thunder. Oh, no, that was an angel speaking. It's a very strange sort of gospel. Sometimes the journey towards Easter is strange. The fact that Jesus embraces suffering, carries the cross willingly for others, that's strange. It's weird. Today in our first reading, the prophet Jeremiah, we have this beautiful reading which I think sums up what the Old Testament really is all about. Deep within them I will plant my law, writing it on their hearts. Over the last 12 months, it's been quite interesting to see the way people have reacted to laws around the world. And maybe it's just me, or maybe I have heard this from other people too, but you might have experienced this as well. Some people have become very aggressive with rules. I've heard neighbours who've called the police on their neighbours because they look over at the other person's house and they think, there looks like there's 11 people there and you're only allowed 10, so they call the police on them. And they've become particularly antsy about what's happened with over the last 12 months, perhaps through fear. As Christians and as human beings throughout history, there's been three sort of concepts of law. There's been law that we sometimes refer to as eternal law or God's law. Then you have sometimes what we refer to as natural law, the law of nature. And then you then have human law, laws that have been written by governments. And what seems to have happened is that we've seemed to have thrown out the role of natural law or of eternal law, or that law that's based upon our heart, that law of love and compassion. And we've become so fearful of what's happened around the world is that we're sometimes slavishly following the rules as we've heard them proclaimed by a premier or a health officer at the most recent press conference, that people sometimes have forgotten that we need to be understanding of other human beings. And yes, this has been a desire to want to keep everybody safe, coming from a good place. But sometimes this is not really based upon true goodness. And we've probably all experienced this in some way over the last few months or the last 12 months or so. People have become so antsy, they've forgotten what we're really about. The law of God, we don't necessarily need the Premier to get up and to say, we need to understand those around us. Don't get angry with your neighbours. Don't try to cause division within your community. Don't be ridiculous and having huge parties. We don't really need the Premier to get up and say that. But the Premier's had to do that at times. Premiers had to say at times, or the health minister said at times, people signing into different venues, as before we had the QR code, signing in as Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse. Is that really helpful? Do we really need laws like that? Or does natural law say to us, well, we want to preserve life. We want to preserve a community. And we've seen some people have sort of taken upon themselves. And I think to me it's been a problem or a challenge. And we've had this over the last few years, even before COVID. Some people have had this idea that nature's become so fluid that we don't really know what natural law is anymore. And then there's people who have this idea, well, we don't really believe in God, so a law that's eternal, a law that takes us to eternity, well, we don't really respect that either. And so we're just stuck with the laws that we see made by humans. But the Old Testament, it's not about the lawmakers going to Parliament making laws after law. It's that God has placed his love in our hearts. Deep within them I will plant my law, writing it on their hearts. And that's what we should be yearning for. That's what God has placed within us. It's not the law necessarily of the government. It's a law based upon the heart. And that's what we should be yearning for. And when we look at the story of Jesus Christ, it's not just a story of following slavishly the rules set down by the Roman Empire or by the Jewish Pharisees and scribes. It's a law based upon a law that's been planted in the heart of Jesus Christ, the love of God. The gospel today, we have the Greeks at the beginning of us. Sir, we should like to see Jesus. And yes, we should hope that in a country with a lot of Christians, that our laws made by our government should be based upon Jesus Christ. However, the reality is that we are in a secular world. And so seeing and discovering Jesus Christ is not necessarily going to be found through laws made by government these days. But when people see us, they shouldn't just see me, they shouldn't just see you, they should be seeing Jesus Christ. And sin, unfortunately, gets in. Perhaps it's his desire for things of this world, perhaps it's his desire for pride or control, that sometimes we overstep things. And the people don't see Jesus in us, in me or in you. And the path towards Holy Week is for us to realise we want to be Jesus. We want to be seen as Jesus in our world. And how should we be seen as Jesus in the world? Should we be known as people who are just slavishly following the rules? Are we people who just overstep other people's freedoms? Do we cause divisions with our neighbour because, oh, well, I think there's 11 people there. There's too many cars, one extra car in the street, so we'll complain about our neighbours. Or do we get to be known as the ones who have compassion, who have kindness, who are known for reaching out to those in difficulties? This is what we're called to be. The ones that people see us, they see Jesus. Jesus wasn't overstepping his authority. He was helping people to experience the love of God. And he did that through service. He did that through sacrifice. And sins where we focus so much on self that we don't understand the needs of others. The needs of others from a worldly perspective, but from a natural perspective and from an eternal perspective. Deep within them I will plant my law, writing it upon their hearts. How does the law of God touch our hearts? How does it make us different to others? This is the challenge. Pray about this during the Mass today. Jesus Christ is the law. Jesus comes as the way, the truth, and the life. He comes as the way of love. He is the law. Every time we come to Mass, we receive communion, and we're placing deep within us Jesus Christ. We refer to it as the body of Christ. But if Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, he is the law, the totality, the summing up of the law, then we are placing the eternal law within us. We're placing God within us. And so when we come to Mass, it's an opportunity for us to reflect, how are we being Jesus? How are people seeing us? Are they seeing us as Jesus, or are they seeing us as something else? So let's today, during the Mass, maybe during the Eucharistic prayer, and as you prepare to come forward to receive communion, reflect on how you're being Jesus. Are we just overstepping our authority with people? Are we perhaps undermining people at times? Are we hurting our neighbour in a hope that we're all going to slavishly follow the rules set down by the Premier or the Health Minister? Or are we a community that reveals the love of God? Are we individuals that reveal the love of God? And when people start to experience that, others will want to experience that as well, in a positive way, in a beautiful way. We should like to see Jesus. These words of the Greeks in this gospel today are words that we can take heart in as well. We should like to see Jesus. Let us discover Jesus anew, and let Jesus be placed deep within us, to allow the law of God, Jesus Christ, to be within us, to be written on our hearts, and then to be lived through our actions and through our lives.